Now, I and you have had the pleasure many times of the company of my first guest this evening, but I never met him until yesterday. And I've got to tell you, he is every bit as lovely in real life as he is on the screen. He is Iran's national treasure, Iran's greatest international asset, though he doesn't like me saying that. So let me introduce for the first time in the studio, Professor Seyed Marandi, the chair of American Studies at the University of Tehran. Professor, I can't tell you how happy I am to see you here in person. Let's start with the apparent U-turn. You've always got to qualify everything that Donald Trump is said to have made today. Well, he did say it because I saw him saying it, but who knows if it will survive the night. But on the face of it, he just solved the crisis between the US and Iran, didn't he?
Well, it depends on whether there's another U-turn. And also in the interview, it seemed as if there was a U-turn in the interview itself.
A U-turn within the interview.
Exactly. Well, first of all, I wanted to welcome you to Iran, your second home.
Thank you.
We do great evil here in the Axis of Evil. We work very hard to satisfy.
You certainly keep us in plenty of material for the show. Yeah.
Well, I'm really grateful that you came here, and it's if you recall, I invited Piers Morgan to come, and he never showed up. And
yeah. I'm going to keep the pressure on him.
Yeah,
I've already started it.
It's
I've said
excellent.
They're waiting for you here. What are you waiting for? Don't you want to see the country you're regularly traducing?
Yes, like he seems to be under the pressure that we have a great leader here, and we're all standing in awe, and we're fearful of criticizing the government. And he has this and he and many others have this very bizarre understanding of
They have a Manichaean approach to all international affairs. You're with us or against us. You're bad or you're good. And it doesn't have anything to do with democracy or any of the things they say it has to do with. It's whether or not you are the official enemy of his state. And usually, the official enemy of his state, the United Kingdom, is really the enemy of the United States.
Exactly.
So back to the United States. Iran doesn't want a nuclear weapon. They've said that many times. I've confirmed it with everyone here. You know my own view. If I was the leader of Iran, I definitely would have had a nuclear weapon long ago. But you don't want one. Indeed, you're religiously precluded from having one. And if it's the case that Trump's only beef with you is a nuclear weapon, what is there to continue to fight about?
Well, you're right. Iran doesn't want a nuclear weapon. There are reasons for that. Iran considers it to be inhumane. Some may say, well, that's just pretense. But during the Iran-Iraq war, when the West was giving Saddam Hussein chemical weapons and the military intelligence to use it, and preventing us from purchasing gas masks, leaders, officials, politicians, the military, different people went to the leader, Imam Khomeini, and said, we want to produce chemical weapons. And he said no. He said it's inhumane and we're not going there. So there's a history here. Another point is that the Iranians believe that if we produce a nuclear weapon, then a lot of these tiny countries, many of them family dictatorships, not really stable necessarily in the long run, they'll want to pursue nuclear weapons. And that would bring about a very dangerous situation. But Iran has said, Dr. Larijani recently came on television, in fact, said if our nuclear installations are bombed, then we are going to change policy. And the fatwa will change because that will become an existential threat to the nation. So there are circumstances in which Iran would produce a weapon, but that would depend on the United States if they attacked. But if the Americans want to be peaceful, there's no reason why Iran would want to produce a weapon. But the problem, George, and I'm sure you know the answer, is not nuclear weapons, it's not human rights, it's not terrorism, it's Israel. The United States holds great contempt for Iran because Iran is the country that supports the Palestinian people. Of course, I would also add Yemen because Ansarullah and the Yemeni government, they are one, and they represent the people of Yemen. So I would say two governments are supporting the Palestinian people. Because Hezbollah is not the government, even though they are like Ansarullah and Iran. But these two governments, they support the Palestinian people, so they're not tolerated. And any excuse will be used to demonize, to put pressure on people, to hurt the country. Maximum pressure has always been used to target ordinary Iranians, to make them suffer, to make life in this city difficult as well as across the country. It's all about Israel. Everything is about the Israeli regime. So the United States and the West, to put it bluntly, they are trying to harm ordinary Iranians to preserve and protect a racist regime, an ethno-supremacist regime that believes in a chosen people, that believes its others are Amalek. That is how the West views this region, despite all the facade about democracy and human rights and woke culture that, even in Western society, all these different minute groups have to be protected and given special privileges and status. But in our region, this tiny ethno-supremacist regime which are colonizers, can crush, they can bomb Syria day and night, they can destroy Lebanon, they can bring about genocide and the Holocaust in Gaza, and they are protected and they are supported, and we should remain silent and accept this reality.
And that's the reason they're bombing Yemen. Even last night, the British and the Americans bombed Yemen. Maybe we'll get a chance to talk about that. But aren't there signs, again, with the caveat of U-turns can become double U-turns, 180 degrees, or the Anna Baerbock famous 360 degrees. Everything's possible. But on the face of it, given Trump's statement today, and more importantly maybe, his sacking of Mike Waltz, the erstwhile national security advisor, now promoted, demoted, who knows, as the US ambassador to the United Nations. He was sacked because Trump insiders are openly being quoted in the main newspapers in the US. He was effectively pursuing Israel's policy rather than Donald Trump's. He was working, to quote a prominent Trump insider inside the White House, he was working for a different president, not the president he was supposed to work for. On the face of it, and I've, as you know, long suspected that the Trump-Netanyahu love affair would not last, because Trump does not like, he wants to be the alpha male. And Netanyahu is a rival for that position in the current picture. The sacking of Waltz, the apparent U-turn, aren't there some signs, straws in the wind, that the previous position of Israel first, last, and always might not actually be forever?
I'm sure that it's not forever. I think the world is changing so fast, and the hostility towards the Israeli regime is so entrenched. I just came back from China a couple of days ago, as you know, and I was in 3 different cities, and everyone who I spoke to was saying that people that they know, and in online conversations and in the media, the hostility towards the Israeli regime is very deep now, and very strong. But we've been here before. It's difficult to say, because if you recall, just a while back, I don't know if it was Truth Social, because I'm not I'm not in it, but I think he reposted a clip of where I forget his name, but he said that Netanyahu, the speaker at Oxford or Cambridge, I think it was Cambridge, says that Netanyahu is a dark
Yes. You did. You retweeted that on Truth Social.
That's right. So, and then literally a few weeks later, he said, I spoke with Netanyahu and we agree on everything.
On everything. Yeah.
So, which one is it? Or is it both?
Well, it's CMLA, which once used to stand for Chief Martial Law Administrator, but in Trump's case, it's cancel my last announcement. But he's not the only one. If you look at Pete Hegseth, by all accounts, the Defense Secretary in the US, by all accounts, he and Tulsi Gabbard are fighting within the cabinet against a war for Netanyahu against Iran. And personally, I believe that. And yet, Hegseth himself tweets things which, on the face of it, explode any possibility of a negotiated settlement. Maybe this is their art of the deal. If it is, I would never make a deal with someone who behaved towards me like that, but that's maybe why I'm not in business. The ugly tweet that Hegseth issued towards Iran, basically threatening Iran with annihilation, whilst at the same time negotiating with. How do your negotiators, I know you're not one, but you have in the past been in negotiations on the JCPOA, how do your negotiators cope with the fact that the man they're talking to, apparently in a civilized way, is taking out his phone and threatening you with perdition?
Well, it was Jeffrey Sachs, by the way, I just remembered. I think that in those negotiations in 2015, as well as the ones 3 years ago, I was a media advisor. I wasn't at the table, but I spoke to the negotiators and asked them what was going on. The problem with Trump, I think, is that even if we do somehow have a deal, despite the fact that he's constantly flip-flopping, and it's not just Iran. So, for example, the Secretary of Defense, he didn't threaten Iran. He said that we're going to, effectively, he said we're going to strike at the time of our own choosing, which is a violation of international law itself. It doesn't help because it's only going to make the Iranians less trusting and more demanding at the negotiating table for assurances. And but also, even if we somehow do come to an agreement, which is, I don't know if it's possible, because right now Trump had momentum over Ukraine. He could have ended the war early on, and people would have. He could have given the concessions that the Russians wanted. He could have ended it. People would have protested. But he had a mandate. He had he'd just come to power. He could have finished it. But now he's sending weapons, and that momentum is gone. On the other hand, he basically, Witkoff on his behalf, imposed a ceasefire. We heard that he read the riot act on Saturday to Netanyahu, and things stopped. Then literally days later, after the ceasefire agreement was signed, he goes and says the Palestinians must go, they must be ethnically cleansed, which violated the ceasefire agreement that he imposed. Yeah. Then he gave the green light to the restarting of the genocide. So with regards to the Russians, he never did what he said he was going to do in one day. With regards to the Palestinians, his own agreement he undermined. So the Iranians are looking and saying, well, if getting to an agreement with him is very difficult. And if there is an agreement, what if he does what he did to the Palestinians? And just one morning, we wake up and see on Truth Social, he says, nope, it's not going to work. I don't accept the deal.
Yeah, I mean, we have a saying that such a deal is not worth the paper it's written on, or in many cases, not written on. And I can see the anxiety that people here would have about that. But it also impacts the domestic politics here, doesn't it? I'm more conscious than I was before I arrived that there's many schools of thought in Iran. Piers Morgan thinks that you're all, North Korean style, all marching to one tune. But actually, Iranians have a wide variety of attitudes towards this. And this kind of behavior from the US administration must strengthen the most radical camp. Because if there's no point in negotiating, then you might as well get busy and make yourselves a giant porcupine so that it's very, very punishing for anyone to attack you.
Two things have happened that have really had an impact in Iran, I think, in the last year and a half. One was Gaza. And Gaza, I think, as it continued and as the genocide became worse and as the numbers of murdered children and women and Palestinians in general continued to rise and the images came out, attitudes towards the United States and Iran changed. I see that even among my own students.
Yeah, so you're the chair of American Studies. So
well, I'm not actually anymore. But
okay, your students are following these matters in minute detail.
Yeah. So, I mean, even students who are not very religious, at least in appearances, or they may be very critical. In the past, some of them were liberal, pro-Western, but now they're seeing that this is liberalism where they carry out genocide and they won't stop. And in a way, it's an unprecedented crime because in human history, we've had bigger crimes, but never carried out in front of the global audience, nonstop. Exactly. And justifying it like Western commentators constantly do. So this has, I think, really destroyed the image of the West, even among its staunch supporters, among those so-called liberals. The second is Trump himself, George, because people in Iran don't like him, and they see him, his bombastic language and his
vulgarity.
And his vulgarity. So, in the past, some of my friends, my colleagues who are liberal, would tell me that, well, democracy, what did they say? They say it corrects itself. So he'll be gone after like 4 years and it won't happen again. Well,
he's back.
And he has a bigger mandate. He won all the swing states. He got the popular vote. He's back with a vengeance. And when he wasn't there, the genocide was being carried out under a democratic president. So people now, much more than before, understand the state's position when they say we don't trust the United States. When you speak to people, they say this guy's crazy. And how can you negotiate with someone who's irrational and mad? So I think the debate in Iran has shifted away from in the past, and people are more steadfast. Of course, that there's not a single voice. There's still many, many different voices. But I think those who were saying that we should appease the United States, I think those voices are much weaker than they were before. Even though in the past they were never the majority, but they existed, they were louder. I think they're much more muted today.
And freely expressing their view. This is completely unknown in the West. The Iranian media, particularly the plethora of newspapers, are 100 schools of thought contending really rather vibrantly, far more vibrantly than they do in Britain or in the United States. Let's park the US for a moment. Let's assume that they're not going to start bombing us tonight. Israel today stated that the enormous embarrassment they suffered yesterday of a missile fired from Yemen under total continuous bombardment from the poorest country in the region, from people who go around with daggers in their belts, penetrated all of the defense systems in Tel Aviv, at the international airport, and landed on the tarmac of Ben Gurion Airport. So humiliating is this for Netanyahu. He's decided to say it wasn't Yemen at all, it was Iran. We're holding Iran responsible for this, even though there isn't any way that it can be the responsibility of Iran. These people don't have maps. The danger, therefore, is that even if Trump does not attack Iran, Netanyahu will.
A couple of things, I think. One is that even if Trump attacks Iran, George, what can he do? He can bomb a few places, but B-52s are not the safest. They're not the most sophisticated aircraft in the world, and they're not stealth by any means. They could lose pilots, and many can be downed. Iran's air defenses are quite good, and they would have to come all the way from Diego Garcia, because these countries in the Persian Gulf region are not going to allow them to bomb Iran from their facilities. That would be the end of their reign in any of these countries if they did so. But even if the Americans come from Diego Garcia, those bases are all fair game, or all American assets wherever they are in the region. But they would have to come 5,000 kilometers. And then they would also have to have aircraft supporting them. It's not going to be easy. The Russians and the Ukrainians, they've been at war for well over 3 years, and while the Russians are winning, still, although day and night they're bombing the Ukrainians at all levels, with artillery, with aircraft, with drones, with missiles, they're still there, they're still fighting. So I don't think a few American jets can do much harm, but the Iranian retaliation could actually do much more harm to the Americans, because the Americans are all over the place, and Iran has really sort of like an infinite number of drones and missiles to use. Yeah, I think the Iranians have over 300 underground bases, which can't be touched, as we've been seeing in Yemen. The Americans haven't been able to destroy those bases. How can they destroy those in Iran? So an American attack would be very limited in scope, and the Iranian response would not be good for the Americans. The Israelis don't have the capacity to strike Iran. They would need the Americans to attack Iran. So if the Israeli regime chose to attack Iran, that would mean that the Americans would be involved. Now, my understanding, and I'm not privy to private intelligence, but my understanding is that the Iranians used True Promise 1 and True Promise 2 to learn about Israeli defenses and its capabilities. And over the past few months, they've been working day and night to prepare themselves for real conflict. And I think that, and we saw just tonight, they showed a new missile, a more advanced missile, that obviously would be used in case of conflict. If the Israelis strike Iran this time around, I think the Iranians will be relentless, and their missiles will be much more, they will hit those targets with much greater accuracy than ever before. It won't be, it's not something that the Israeli regime can win. So I think ultimately it's up to Trump, but it's not something, they cannot defeat Iran. And war with Iran, George, you know this better than anyone else, because you were a key person in the anti-war movement. The Iraq war, they had to bring in 600,000 people alongside their coalition. If they want to fight Iran, they'd have to bring in, what, 1.5 million people? Do they even have those numbers? Where are they going to bring them? Do they have that money? Who's going to host them? We live in a different world today. Yeah. Iran is not Iraq. The United States is not the United States of 2003. So war is out of the question, that sort of war. At most, they can carry out a few airstrikes, and I think it would not end well for the United States.